page 5, line 29, at the end, insert the words as printed on the marshalled list.
My Lords, I rise to speak to Amendments 56, 58, 63 and 183 in my name in this group. I have some complex arguments to make, but the time is pressing, so I shall attempt to do so as briefly as possible. I'm assisted in that by the fact that my noble friend on the front bench has very kindly explained that the government is not going to accept my worthless amendments without actually waiting to hear what it is I might have said on their behalf. Nonetheless, may I turn first, therefore, briefly, necessarily briefly, to amendment number 183. My Lords, this bill has been described, and I think justly, as a Twitter-shaped bill. It doesn't take proper account of other platforms that operate in different ways, and I return to the question of Wikipedia, but also platforms like Reddit and other community-driven platforms. The requirement for a user verification tool, of course, is intended to lead to the possibility that users who are ordinary, unverified users, people like you and me, could make the option to see only that content which comes from those people who are verified. This is broadly a welcome idea, but when you combine that with the fact that there are community-driven sites like Wikipedia where you have community contributions and where many people who contribute to those sites are not always going to be verified, and sometimes there are very good reasons why they'd want to preserve their anonymity, you end up with the possibility of whole articles having sentences left out and whatever. Well, that's not going to happen. The fact is that nobody like Wikipedia can operate a site like that. So this is another one of those existential questions that the government has not properly grappled with, and I think really is going to have to address before we come to third reading, because this isn't going to work the way it is. As far as my other amendments are concerned, they are supportive of and consistent with the idea of user verification, and they recognise, as my noble friend actually said, that user verification is intended to be a substitute for the abandoned legal but harmful clause. And I welcome the abandonment of the legal but harmful clause, and I do recognise that this provision is one that is more consistent with individual freedom and autonomy, and the idea that we can make choices of our own. But it's still open to the possibility of abuse by the platforms themselves. So the amendments that I'm putting forward here, first of all, address the question, what should be the default position? And my argument is that the default position should be that filtering is not on. One has to opt in to filtering because that seems to me the adult proposition. That is the adult choice. And the danger is that the platforms themselves either opt you into filtering automatically as the default, so that you don't actually see what might be called the full fat milk that is available on the internet, or that they harass you to do so with constant pop-ups, as we already get, saying, I mean, if you go on the Nextdoor website, you're constantly getting pop-ups saying you should switch on notification. I don't want notifications. I want to look at it when I want to look at it. I don't want notifications. But I'm constantly being driven into pressing the button that says switch on notifications. Well, you could have something similar here, constantly being driven into switching on the filters, because the platforms themselves are now going to be very worried about the possibility that you might see illegal content. And I think we should guard against that. The second thing is, if we're going to have, and this is Amendment 58, if we're going to have user verification, and as I say, I think there's a lot to be said for it as an approach to this, it does need to be applied consistently, so that if the platform decides to filter out racist abuse and you opt in to filtering out racist abuse or some other sort of specified abuse, then they have to do it on all racist abuse and not simply racist abuse that comes from people they don't like, or gender assignment abuse, but they only filter out stuff from one side or other of the argument. So the word consistently, which is included here, is intended to address that and to require them to have policies that show that if you opt into having something filtered out, it will be done on a proper, consistent and systematic basis and not influenced by the platform's own particular political views. And then finally, there is the question of how this is communicated to users of the internet. So we come to clause 63, and what this does is to force the platforms to make these policies about how user verification is going to operate, to make them part of their terms and conditions in a public and visible way, and to ensure that those provisions then are applied consistently. So it goes a little bit further than the others. The others could stand on their own, but this adds a little bit more to it and requires public and consistent policies that people can actually see. Now, I think this is actually working with the grain of what the government is trying to do. I don't see that the government can object to any of this. There's nothing wrecking here. It's all trying to make it more workable, more transparent and more obvious. So I'd hope that given the few minutes that will elapse, or the short period of time that will elapse between my sitting down and the Minister returning to the dispatch box, that he will have reflected on the negative remarks he made in his initial speech, and will find it possible to accept these amendments on the basis now that he's actually heard the arguments for them. Thank you.
My Lord.